ADF also took up the case of an Ohio college professor who refused to refer to a transgender student by her preferred pronouns and instead referred to her by her last name only. The professor was disciplined by the university after the student filed the complaint, but the professor still refused to use the student's preferred pronouns, claiming it was against his free speech rights and religious views to do so. In February 2020, a trial court dismissed the case, saying that misgendered students is not protected free speech, and that the government employees like Nicholas Maraweather, who works at a state-funded institution, Shawnee State University, have limited free speech rights when they are performing their jobs. The court also determined that the First Amendment does not protect them from disciplinary proceedings. Transgender athletes competing in girls' sports became another anti-trans front in 2019 for ADF. In June, ADF filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights on behalf of three cisgender female high school athletes in Connecticut. Though there is no definitive proof that transgender athletes have advantages over cisgender athletes, Connecticut has a trans-exclusive policy with regard to its school and competing in sports. But ADF alleges that transgender girls have an unfair advantage over cisgender females because they're, quote, biological males and are thus stronger and faster. I mean, I feel like it depends on the person. Obviously, men are stronger, but if you have a relatively built chick who's trained, and you have just an untrained biological dude, I'm pretty sure that dude's getting his ass kicked. Like, honestly. Alright. ADF filed the complaint with a lawsuit filed in February 2020, arguing that Title IX, the 1972 federal rights law that prohibits gender discrimination in programs that receive federal fundings, does not apply to trans students. The law, ADF argues, was designed to prohibit discrimination against cisgender girls and women. If ADF is successful, trans student athletes may not be allowed to compete in school sports in accordance with their gender identities. 3 cisgender high school track athletes filed suit with their mothers, alleging that allowing trans girls to compete against them results in, quote, boys displacing girls in competitive track events in Connecticut, end quote. Days after the lawsuit was filed, one of the plaintiffs in the case defeated her trans rival twice in 8 days, winning 2 state championships. Again, this is just an individual case basis. Like, even if it was true that trans people had an advantage, there'd still be cases where cis women came out on top. And as is, this isn't true in anyways, so that's interesting. This isn't even like thousands of people running like that trans chick coming in 6,000th place. This is just probably like 5 people at most on this track. Alright. In March 2020, the Department of Justice filed a statement of interest in the Connecticut lawsuit to support ADF's claims. The statement of interest contains similar language to ADF's, referring to trans girls as biological males, and claiming that the policy allowing them to compete with cisgender girls deprives the latter of, quote, the single-sex athletic competition that are one of the archaic accomplishments of Title IX. The Department of Justice has filed other statements of interest and amicus briefs supporting ADF's anti-LGBT arguments in its lawsuit over the past few years, including the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. Okay, I read that right. I was thinking like there was one point where it just said Masterpiece Case, and I thought, okay, so there was another time where I read Masterpiece Cake Shop and that wasn't the case, but it actually does say interchangeably Cake Shop case or just case. So, alright, I'm not crazy. Holy crap. And in the funeral home case that went before the Supreme Court in 2019. ADF also backed a nationwide campaign in 2020 to get anti-trans sports bills passed in state legislatures, In Arizona, it worked with Republican state lawmakers Nancy Bardo, an anti-LGBT group Center for Arizona Policy, to push such a bill. In Idaho, Republican State Senator Mary Souza sponsored an anti-trans bill, anti-sports trans bill, and claimed that Alliance Defending Freedom has been working with lawmakers on the bill and would, quote, be reasonable for any legal defense fees, end quote. The Idaho bill passed and was signed into law by the governor in March 2020. Damn. Well, I do remember making videos about that, but I totally forgot all the details. Man, my old videos are so cringe. Alright, on to the next article. I don't even remember what the next article was in terms of the theme of it can't happen here, which honestly, I regret it a little bit because there's no like clear thing that I'm aiming at. There's just an amalgamation of like terrible things that are just happening in general. Okay. So I remember wanting to read this. Maybe this should have been on like the pro groomer for the birth rate, but I feel like this had to be its separate thing. Okay, GOP lawmakers decry state bill that could execute a woman over an abortion. Representative Nancy Mace on Tuesday decried a South Carolina bill that would criminalize abortion as a homicide and allow women who undergo the procedure to become eligible for the death penalty in the state, criticizing the GOP for not finding a more middle ground approach to a contentious issue. Middle ground? Like what? You just get your arm chopped off? Or you just get put in prison? What's a middle ground to death? Okay. Quote, there were 21 members of the South Carolina state legislature that not only did they draft a bill, but they actually filed a bill that would criminalize women who had abortion and charge them with murder in the state of South Carolina. Murder can mean execution, end quote, said Mace in an interview on the Hills Rising. Quote, in a sense, the state, if it were to pass, it will never pass, thankfully, but they were going to give more rights to a rapist than women who had been raped. Again, not surprising, right? Like, seriously. They were going to put women up to the death penalty who had abortions for any reasons, end quote, Mace said. Republican lawmakers in South Carolina put forward a bill that would redefine person under state law to include a fertilized egg, which would then receive the protection of the state's homicide law. The bill would include an exception for women who get abortion because of the threat of imminent death or great bodily injury, but not for the rape or incest. Mace, who has said she was raped at age 16, has taken a more moderate stance on abortion, distancing herself from many of the Republican Party. Okay, is that a moderate stance? Like, distancing yourself from the Republican Party? Okay. She said, oh, good. I mean, obviously that's good. I'm just saying, it doesn't seem moderate. Okay, she said the GOP learned nothing from the November midterms, when GOP candidates lost a number of key races and filed to take control of the Senate if they continue with the party's current abortion stance. End quote. And so you see these conversations happening and actual legislation being filed, but it's like, what the hell is going on? This is not right, and certainly doesn't show any compassion to women. And we, as Republicans, as a party, learn nothing from the midterm election if this is the playbook going forward, she said. The South Carolina lawmaker said her district transformed from, quote, mildly pro-choice to vast majority of pro-choice after the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade last summer. And she warned that the GOP could face a rough 2024 if it acknowledged how important the issue is to some swing voters and look for the middle ground. What is the middle ground? Is the middle ground like you can have an abortion if it's rape or incest? If that's it, sure. But I just don't see how there's a middle ground to some of these things. All right. Quote, people can be pro-life but also not want the laws to change, and the Republican Party was tone deaf on this issue. It's going to hurt us in 24. It'll hurt our chances of winning in the White House back. And we're going to be in a dogfight to win and keep the majority in 24 in the House, May said. Exactly. The Republicans would win if they weren't making this a culture war and fighting over the same shit they usually do. Of course, I mean, Republicans have always done this, like, kind of race baity shit. Like, I'm not gonna get into that. It's whatever. Her talk on Rising echoes sentiment she summarized on an op-ed last week for Charleston's Post and Courier, blasting state-level bill. You quote, you heard that right? Some South Carolina's lawmakers are so pro-life they want to extend the death penalty to women who have been raped. I think we have to disagree after all, she wrote. Oh, is that the end of that? Oh, I thought it went a little longer than that. But yeah, I imagine none of you are surprised with this. Alright. And I think this is a continuation of the Supreme Court taking out potentially, crap, I forgot. Alright, Griswold v. Connecticut. Yeah, I think that might be next, honestly. The Justice Department is seeking the emergency relief from U.S. Supreme Court. Oh, sorry, I didn't read the thing. Justice Department will ask its Supreme Court to restore full access to abortion pill. Oh, that's good. But will it happen? The Justice Department. Actually, I didn't look into this enough. This is where I last was doing research on this specific theme and trying to, like, you know. Anyways, the Justice Department is seeking emergency relief from the U.S. Supreme Court in the Texas case involving limited access to abortion drug, mifepristone. Oh, I remember this. Yes, I do not think this is Griswold v. Connecticut. Okay. Late Wednesday, the U.S. Supreme Court of Appeals for Fifth Circuit ruled that mifepristone, which in the U.S. is used in most medications, abortions, and to treat miscarriages, is approved for use up to 7 weeks of pregnancy during the appeals process, but could no longer be dispensed by mail. Ooh. Okay, so this has reached the Comstock law level. Honestly, the person who made it allowed to make it accessible in the mail, Margaret Sanger actually helped with that. So she was for this privacy of in your own home doing this safely with like rules and how to do it. Like it was like pamphlets and like guidelines. So as much as she might have been racist and there was elements where the minority communities, like low-income communities, got their welfare connected to them with their contraceptive, there was still a privacy element of it. You know, it was there if you wanted it. So this is really messed up that this is going so deeper than, you know, you're not even allowed to get it, you know, on your own individual account. Alright. This was a dial back from the previous approval of up to 10 weeks and access to prescribed medication through the mail. Quote, the Justice Department strongly disagrees with the Fifth Circuit's decision in Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine v. FDA to deny our request for a state pending appeal. We will be seeking emergency relief from Supreme Court to defend the FDA's scientific judgment and protect Americans' access to safe and effective reproductive care. End quote. Attorney General Merrick Garland wrote in a statement announcing the Justice Department's actions. Lawyers for the Biden administration had previously asked the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals for an emergency stay on lower court's injunction ruling by the U.S. District Judge Matthew McSmark that was stated to go into effect Friday and would block the Food and Drug Administration approval of mifepristone. Sorry about that. I was actually reading on my own by accident. Okay. Department of Justice lawyers argued that, quote, the district court upended decades of reliance by blocking FDA's approval of misoprostone and depriving patients of access to this safe and effective treatment based on the court's own misguided assessment of the drug's safety. The Supreme Court has not yet indicated that it will take up the case. The Fifth Circuit's decision drew rebuke from Vice President Kamala Harris on Tuesday, and nobody cares about Kamala Harris. It, quote, second guesses the agency's medical experts, end quote, she said. If this decision stands, no medication from chemotherapy drugs to asthma medication to blood pressure pills to insulin would be safe from attacks, end quote, I think she went on to say. Background, how the case got to this point. Since it was first approved by the FDA in September 2000, mifepristone has been used by about 5 million women. The drug has been demonstrated strong records of both efficacy and safety. When taken in guidance with agency guidelines, the two-pill regimen successfully ends the pregnancy over 99.6% of the time, and fewer than half of a percent of patients experience major complications, according to the NIH. The original approval allowed misoprostone to be used to end pregnancies throughout 7 weeks. The agency expanded that to 10 weeks and loosened some other safety restrictions in 2016, then approved a generic version in 2019. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021, the FDA allowed the drug, which is available only by prescription, to be obtained by mail. Well, that's at least good. Several major medical organizations, including the American Medical Association, say that mifepristone is safe and have urged courts to preserve access. In November 2021, a coalition of anti-abortion groups and doctors filed a federal lawsuit in Texas District Court challenging the FDA's approval of the drug. So my guess is this is more on the list to be banned because like white women are using it or something. Like I imagine there's a demographic issue going on with this specific contraceptive. Unlike, I doubt they're going to remove like Norplant. The Supreme Court's definitely not doing that. Even though Justice Clarence Thomas, he was pointing out statistics about like people with disabilities being wiped out in Sweden, like rates of Down syndrome being less and less in certain parts of the world because of abortions. I would be skeptical of that. I would have to look into it, but if it's a woman's choice, she has the right, but I just feel like it's concern trolling on the Supreme Court's case to pretend like it cares. Like, at all. Okay. The plaintiffs argued that the FDA based its original decision on, quote, transparency false conclusions, end quote, about the drug's benefits and risks. Then they contend that the FDA failed to satisfy rigorous scientific standards, end quote, when it later expanded access to the drug. On April 7th, Max Mark sided with the conservative groups and issued a preliminary injunction to vacate the FDA's approval of the drug altogether, a decision with expensive ramifications that legal experts called unprecedented. In his ruling, Max Mark, a Trump appointee, adopted much of the language of the anti-abortion advocates, including referring to abortion providers as abortionists and fetuses as unborn children. I mean, unborn children is not as weird as abortionists, but it's interesting. I have heard abortionists in some books that I've read, so this isn't just some made-up thing conservatives are using now, honestly. It's interesting. Obviously, it's messed up. He stayed his own injunction for 7 days to allow an appeal court to weigh in, allowing the drug to remain available in the meantime. The FDA requested the emergency stay of Maxmark's decision, asking the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to weigh in by midday Thursday. Late Wednesday night, just before midnight Eastern Time, the appellate panel issued a complicated ruling on the injunction, siding in part with the FDA and part with the anti-abortion coalition. What? It would allow FDA's original approval of misoprostol to remain in place, the panel said, finding that the statute of limitations to challenge it had likely passed in 23 years since the approval was first issued. But the three-judge panel also allowed Maxmark's injunction to remain in effect on the FDA's later actions on misoprostol, including the expansion to 10 weeks of pregnancy and telehealth access, a decision that could greatly diminish access to the drug. Questions remain about the potentially competing order out of another federal court in Washington. A group of Democratic attorneys general from 17 states and the District of Columbia had sued the FDA to expand access to misoprostol. Earlier this month, Judge Thomas Rice, an Obama appointee, issued his own preliminary injunction ordering the FDA to preserve status quo access to misoprostol in the jurisdictions represented by Attorney General, including the telehealth access and approval for use up to 10 weeks of pregnancy. I hope you can still get it through the mail, because that's really fucked up if, like, some Comstock law fucking shit happened like that. On Thursday evening, Rice issued an order affirming that for 17 states and D.C., the parties in the case before him, access to misoprostol should remain unchanged, regardless of Texas judge's injunction and the Fifth Circuit's decisions, so their case remains on a collision course. So it's like, this is what you try to do when you try to make a middle ground out of stupid shit like this. Like, you can't do that. Like, how do we benefit women and ruin their lives at the same time? Like, okay. The Supreme Court's decision could clarify the path forward. With access to the drug uncertain, some states have stocked up on mifepristone, along with the second drug in 2-pill regimen, mosoprostol. Mosoprostol is commonly used outside the U.S. as a sole drug in medication abortions. Alright. And this saga is probably continuing on. Alright, next article. And this is completely unrelated, and I think I'll end it after this one. But, this concerns me specifically, and there was a point where I started hearing, like, weird, crazy shit happening with libraries, and I started mildly talking to people about it at work, and it was just, it wasn't good. Like, somebody said to me at work, like, well, you gotta think why they're book burning. Like, as if there's a good reason to be book burning. Like, okay. And this other dude I said it to, I said, well, they're burning books in Tennessee. And he says, well, it's just Tennessee. You know, it's basically a it can't happen here kind of thing. It's really twisted. Okay. How long until a library worker is killed? Book censorship news, April 7th, 2023. Okay, yeah, this so happened a while ago this year, but this is probably still happening, like, legit. Okay. When book banning started to heat up 2 years ago, many wondered how long until a library worker would be seriously hurt over defending the right to read. Now, we know it's not going to be long at all. Over the last month, several libraries have faced bomb and shooting threats as a direct result of the books housed in their collections. books that were reviewed by professionals and deemed appropriate for those schools and public libraries. Books that, of course, feature queer and/or by people of color writers and characters that do not align with the views of those who believe that dialing in murder threats as an appropriate way to handle those who do not follow the radical right-wing Christian nationalist agenda. Threat directed towards the Lebanon Public Library on March 28th at approximately 6:11 p.m. The Boone County Communication Center received a call from the Indiana Suicide Hotline advising that they had just spoken to an individual who was making threats toward the Lebanon Public Library. The Indiana Suicide Hotline reported to Boone County dispatchers that the subject was currently at the Lebanon Public Library and about to make entry into the building. It was reported that the individual was going to enter the library with a rifle and 2 pistols with the intent to cause harm to employees and any other bystanders. While this person announced this, I imagine because he knew that he would just end up doing it, and nobody would take him seriously for some reason. Yeah, the FBI, he's like, "Hey FBI, watch this." Okay. LPD officers and Boone County deputies arrived swiftly and took immediate action to locate any threat that was present at the library. After an extensive search of the entire library and the immediate area surrounding the library, no one was located carrying any rifles or firearms. At this time, there is no concern or danger to the public. LPD investigators will continue to investigate this incident. That's insane. That's okay. So it's just like swatting, but not. Okay. The flood of threats in March are not the first threats, but they represent the most number of threats leveraged against library workers so far, and it should go without saying by now that this fight is not about the books, it's about eradicating people, both those who are queer and/or people of color and those who choose to defend their rights to exist exactly as they are. Pictured above, the threat to shoot up the Lebanon Public Library in Indiana. This library was closed for nearly a week following the threat. A bomb threat called into Northwest Junior High, Iowa City, over the book "This Book is Gay." Interesting that the article downplays the credibility of the threat, but also mentions that this was a nationwide, coordinated effort. The district removed the book from the shelves for review following the threat. So, I want to say coward, but it's also, they're just doing what they want, but for their own safety, I can understand, but this would be like all the gay people and all the allies moving out of a state because they don't want to be necessarily hate crimed, and I feel like that's an understandable reaction, but you gotta fight, I guess, and people are just not willing to fight sometimes because we can't believe that this is happening. Like, I'm sorry, that's really random. Okay, but it wasn't just once. That school had a second threat called in too. A bomb threat called into the Indy Reads program, Indianapolis. While not focused on library workers specifically, this is worth including here because it put literacy advocates and booksellers in the line of danger. Hendersonville Public Library received several bomb threats from an individual in Connecticut related to the Camerson nonsense that happened there. Your God would be so embarrassed. Okay. I thought this was just like pure data, not opinion, but whatever. I can understand you have an emotional sentiment added to it. Alright. Hilton Public Schools, New York, received a bomb threat over "This Book is Gay." Actually, that district had 2 bomb threats. Nelson Public Library in British Columbia, Canada, canceled their Drag Story Time event over violent threats. While We're Abroad, they were There were death threats over the drag story time at the Mount Gambier Public School in Australia. In Ireland, libraries are being warned to beef up security. If you're thinking, quote, okay, that's not in the US, it is the US that is fueling this. Violent threats against a drag story time outside an animal shelter in Louisville. This is one day before the shooting at a Christian school in Nashville. Okay. Yeah, shove your thoughts and prayers. Obviously, I just what exactly which exactly what the bigotry wants. They want this as their holy war, and they themselves joyful warriors. Um, Unfortunately, and you got like Moms for Liberty and like people like Matt Walsh and all these sickos that are really just I wouldn't say they're the front line at all, but they're like the stochastic people that may have or may not have connections to actual elites that are orchestrating this. Alright, book ban legislation update. Take some time to catch up on the latest update on book ban legislation making its way through various state legislatures. Book censorship news, April 7th, 2023. LGBTQ books removed from Lino Public Library must be returned to shelves. Meanwhile, in Spotsylvania, Virginia, 14 books were pulled from shelves. The district's superintendent is floating the idea of removing all school librarians now, claiming it's a budgetary issue. 9 books have been pulled from Jefferson County Parish, LA, pending review. Hi, yes, this is a book ban. The school board in New Hanover County is being compared to Nazis and Marxists for creating a diverse book review committee to evaluate challenged books. How one parent got all the graphic novels removed from Awassa Public Schools. So, is it even fair to compare Marxism to Nazism? That's really what's creating the confusion here, honestly. Like, people who think the leftists are the Nazis, this is insane, honestly. Like, that's not a good thing to... That person should not be political on the internet. Okay. How one parent got all the graphic novels removed from Awassa Public Schools. Lucky was removed from Hernando County Schools, but that was apparently not enough for the book crisis actors. A children's biography about Harvey Mills and I Am Jazz were removed from Ogden Public Schools. I guess the good news is that Julian is a Mermaid will remain on shelves. Okay. I don't get it. Like, I know that's probably a book, but I don't get the compare and contrast. It must be a fictional book. It's a shame I don't know it. I'm sorry. I would still advocate to keep it up, obviously. Okay. Vero Beach High School removed the graphic novel adaptation of the Diary of Anne Frank from shelves. Okay, that's... Just remove all history, I guess. Pretty sure Ron DeSantis is helping with this in some way. Oh man, I don't know if I pulled any articles for that. God damn. Okay. Quote, the item in question was a report Ganem asked the library staff to compile documenting every LGBTQ-themed book, every sex education book, and every book about Christianity present in the city library, according to Ganem. She wanted the public to see real statistics, end quote. What a spectacular waste of time and taxpayer money, continuing to go on in Fremont, Nebraska, where one bigot is trying to ruin the public library. All of this information is in the catalog. True. The communable the municipal attorney of Anchorage, Alaska, is now making the decision over whether or not Let's Talk About It can remain in the city's school district. State Superintendent Ryan Walters in Oklahoma now has a list of over 100 books he deems pornographic that are in the public schools. Canby School District is being ordered to update their collection policies so that a single complaint does not automatically lead to books being pulled, which is, surprise, a current issue. An update on the nonsense in Siloam Springs at their public library. Quote, "Star questions that will happen after the titles are reviewed. No one wants to ban books. I'm totally for the free exchange of ideas," he said, but he wants there to be a rating system for books or a restricted area where they and are only accessible to adults. If you go to a library, any library, it'll have a kids or an adult section. So this is just pure stupidity. I don't understand. Like, you mean you're not even allowed to go in there at all? So, no, that's stupid. It already sections it off. It's clear and cut. Okay. I absolutely love the, quote, "I don't believe in banning books, but I believe in restricting them" crowd. Why is the newspaper giving the right-wing pastor airspace over the book ban debates in Louisiana? Just because you're a bigot and you say so yourself doesn't mean you get to determine that for others. The same paper in the same series gives a Livingston Parish parent room to talk about book restrictions in the public library too. Okay. Alright, sorry about that. I was just seeing if this was all like tabulated in this way. You know, you see these dots on the side like it's a checklist or something. It's kind of a weird article. Okay. Days after the Plano ISD student overdosed on fentanyl, Ortega said the real drug is pornography and Plano ISD's books. What the heck? They are uneffing hinged. You know, sex is under fire at the Conway Public School. Union County Public School are trying to implement new policy about curriculum that would essentially eliminate any queer content. The read on this policy is so simultaneously broad and narrow that it is meaningless. Quote, 3 books that have been called into question: The Stonewall Riot by Gail Pittman, In Deeper Waters by F.G. Lukens, and This Is Our Rainbow, edited by Catherine Locke and Nicole Melby. The books written for readers ranging from 3rd grade up on, present LGBTQ representation stories based on actual events. Quote, I looked the books up. I will never ever be able to get that out of my mind. I cannot believe those types of books and that type of reading is made public to the children of any age, end quote, said the Wasilla parent Terry Lyons during the public comments. This is a book school book fair in Alaska. Mitsu has a history here. Yes, more. No. What? What? I don't know what just happened. Okay. Okay, so this should be the last article I read, guys. Because we got the main gist of that article. I thought it was going to go on into more. I don't know, I just didn't like how it was, like, structured. It, like, bothered me.
I don't know, maybe I'm missing out, but this shit right here is just absolutely insane. So, more child marriage nonsense. So, they were probably going to make this the 8th state to ban child marriage. But nope. Marriage ban bill defeated in West Virginia House. Charleston, West Virginia, a bill that would have prohibited minors from getting married in West Virginia was defeated Wednesday night in a legislative committee. The Republican-dominated Senate Judiciary Committee rejected the bill on a 9-8 vote a week after it passed the House of Delegates. The vote came shortly after the bill's main sponsor, Democratic Del Kayla Young of Kanawha County, testified briefly before the committee. She said that since 2000, there have been more than 3,600 marriages in the state involving one or more children. Currently, children can marry as young as 16 in West Virginia with parental consent. Anyone younger than that also must get a judge's waiver. Okay, I seriously thought there was something hidden where it was a little better, where you weren't allowed to go any younger, even if a judge, if the judge was like, nah, man, just don't. Please don't. But he's like, okay, sure. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Quote, for now, there will be no floor for the age of marriage in West Virginia, endangering our kids, Young wrote on Twitter after the vote. In a rebuke, Cabell County Democratic Senator Mike Wolfell reminded that the committee after the vote that Wednesday was International Women's Day. Some of the bill's opponents have argued that teenage marriage are a part of life in West Virginia. Kanawha County Republican Senator Mike Stewart, a former federal prosecutor who sided with the majority, said his vote, quote, wasn't a vote against women, end quote. He said his mother was married when she was 16, and 6 months later I came along, and I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Oh, no. Yeah, just use some chick who has some syndrome when she's young and indoctrinated as your metric of consent. Fucking wacko. Okay. What the heck? The bill would have established that 18 is the age of consent and removed the ability of the minor to obtain consent through their parents, legal guardians, or by court petition. Existing legal marriages, including those done in other states, that would have been unaffected. According to the nonprofit group Unchained at Last, which seeks to end forced and child marriages, 7 states have set the minimum age for marriage at 18, all since 2018. Supporters of such legislation say it reduces domestic violence, unwanted pregnancies, and improves lives of teens. Yes, you should have a life outside of childbearing. Of course, larger families helps the economy, but this isn't like a moral argument. This is just like a mechanical one, unfortunately. Although recent figures are unavailable, according to the Pew Research Center, West Virginia had the highest rate of child marriages among the states in 2014, when the state's 5-year average was 7.1 marriages for every 1,000 children ages 15 to 17. Jesus Christ. Okay, guys. I'll see ya.